Welcome to another chapter of the unknown, where the fate of humanity is no longer just a matter of survival. It's a question of who we truly are. In this story, Dr. Arin Solace, a human xenobiologist, stands at the crossroads of a new galactic age after surviving a cosmic storm that should have destroyed her. She is forced to face a choice. Will humanity's resilience be their salvation or their downfall? Join us as we dive into the heart of human strength, sacrifice, and the unknown consequences of adapting to the impossible. Stay with us as the story unfolds. The alarms did not chime. They tore through the auditorium like a blade. Red light strobed across 10,000 alien faces as gravity faltered and the vast dome of the Galactic Medical Conference shuddered. Dr. Arin Solace felt the floor dip beneath her boots just as the panoramic star field beyond the glass flared white. A pulsar spike, too close, too strong. The shielding grid flickered, then screamed in protest. Delegates began collapsing in their seats, crystalline bodies fracturing, gelatinous forms blistering under invisible radiation. Atmosphere vents hissed as containment doors slammed down a second too late. The station AI's voice cut through the chaos. Cold and clinical. Radiation surge exceeding tolerance parameters. Structural integrity compromised. Solace's pulse hammered in her ears. She tasted metal at the back of her throat. Around her, species built for fragile equilibrium were already failing. Humanity's paradox was about to be tested. The air thinned with a sound like a dying breath. Pressure warnings pulsed across the curved walls as micro-fractures spidered through the dome's transparent alloy. Dr. Solace snapped her emergency respirator into place while delegates around her convulsed. Their biologies unraveling under radiation, their cells had never evolved to endure. A Xenthian's metallic skin dimmed and cracked. A Zoric's envoy liquefied into a shimmering collapse. Overhead, ventilation shafts vented atmosphere in violent bursts, sucking loose papers and smaller bodies toward the ceiling before gravity stuttered again. Oxygen at 62%, the AI reported. Sector 3 experiencing lethal exposure. Solace's dosimeter ticked upward, steady but survivable. For now. Her lungs burned, not from lack of air, but from metallic ionization seeping through compromised filters. Around her, panic rippled, species scrambling toward escape pods that rejected incompatible physiologies. The station was not built for mass extinction. It was happening anyway. A surviving delegate clung to the edge of the shattered podium, its translucent skin flickering as internal organs destabilized. Doctor. Solace caught it before gravity lurched again, dragging both of them against a sealed bulkhead. Outside the fractured dome, space burned white with radiation. Human, the creature rasped through a failing translator. You claimed your kind survives what should kill you. Another shockwave rattled the structure, and emergency lights dimmed to a bleeding red. Solace's dosimeter climbed past recommended exposure limits. Her skin prickled beneath the suit as cells began frantic repair. Yes, she said, breath tight, eyes scanning for an exit that still functioned. The alien's gaze fixed on her with something between awe and fear. Then answer this, it whispered as atmosphere continued to bleed away. When survival demands everything, what do you become? The lights failed completely, leaving only the rising hum of radiation. Solace moved before the darkness could settle. She slammed her palm against the emergency locker and tore free the exo-suit frame. Metal unfolding around her torso with mechanical precision. The helmet sealed over her head in a hiss of compressed air. External radiation levels spiked across her visor display, far beyond standard safety margins. Exposure window, 11 minutes. Orpheus calculated. The corridor beyond the auditorium doors flickered with electrical arcs, atmosphere venting in violent gusts. She locked the suit's magnetic boots and checked the dosimeter again. Already climbing. A vial slid from her forearm compartment. She pressed it against her thigh and triggered the injector. Radio protectant burned through her bloodstream like liquid fire. Around her, alien delegates lay unconscious or dying, their forms too delicate for this storm. The shielding array had failed in Sector 3. Manual override was the only option. She keyed the airlock release. The airlock cycled open, and gravity vanished. Solace pushed off into the corridor as loose debris drifted past her visor like slow shrapnel. Sparks snapped from ruptured panels, casting brief blue flares across the darkness. Her boots clicked into magnetic mode, catching the hull each time she reached for purchase. Atmosphere hissed from torn seams, pulling at her suit with invisible force. Radiation levels increasing, Orpheus warned. The dosimeter pulsed amber, thened. Bodies floated ahead, delegates suspended in frozen arcs. Some intact, others twisted by decompression. Solace swallowed and kept moving. Every breath echoed inside her helmet, loud and measured. A cracked viewport revealed the pulsar flare streaking the void in violent white ribbons. She calculated distance to the shield core junction, 40 meters through open vacuum. Not far. Far enough to die. She pushed off again, drifting toward the exposed sector. Solace slammed into the bulkhead outside the shield core chamber and latched on. The access hatch hung half open, warped by heat and radiation. Inside, the shielding array pulsed erratically, arcs of energy snapping between exposed conduits. "Automated systems offline," Orpheus reported. "Manual recalibration required." Of course it was. She forced the hatch wider and pulled herself in, magnetic boots locking against the floor. The chamber vibrated like a living thing in pain. Radiation readings spiked beyond safe thresholds. Her suit filters strained to compensate. She reached the control panel, its interface flickering with corrupted data. Burnt circuitry filled the air with a bitter tang, even through her filters. "Core stability at 41%, Orpheus warned. Solace wiped condensation from her visor and began rerouting power through manual nodes. Each switch she flipped sparked resistance. The station groaned as if deciding whether to survive. The first wave of pain arrived without warning. It wasn't heat. It was pressure, as if her cells were swelling beneath her skin. The dosimeter screamed past red into flashing white. "Radiation exceeding projected human tolerance," Orpheus said, voice steady, almost detached. Solace's vision shimmered. Her fingers trembled over the manual override panel. Inside her body, DNA strands fractured and renit in frantic cycles. Nausea surged. She tasted iron. The radioprotectant in her bloodstream fought to blunt the damage, but the exposure was relentless. A thin trickle of blood slid from her nose inside the helmet. She blinked hard, forcing focus. Humans didn't ignore damage. They endured it. Adaptive repair pathways activated, cells sacrificing themselves so others could survive. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, irregular but persistent. The chamber pulsed with unstable energy. She tightened her grip on the console and kept working. A proximity alert flashed across her visor. Life signs, weak but present, flickered from the adjacent corridor. Solace cursed under her breath and pushed away from the console. She found a Xenthian delegate wedged between twisted beams, its metallic epidermis dim and cracking under radiation stress. Its physiology couldn't metabolize the spike the way hers could. She anchored herself, locked magnetic boots, and hauled the brittle body against her chest plate. The suit's environmental buffer strained as it tried to stabilize alien atmospheric parameters inside a secondary field. Warning: oxygen redistribution affecting personal reserves. Orpheus noted. She ignored it. The corridor was a drift of debris and floating bodies, each one too fragile for this storm. Her muscles burned, energy reserves plummeted. Humans consumed fuel like furnaces, and she was burning fast. She reached the safer bulkhead and sealed it manually. As Solace sealed the bulkhead, a new transmission bled through the static, not a distress call, structured, deliberate. Orpheus rerouted it to her visor. Coordinates matched a neighboring system. The radiation spike's frequency pattern shifted in precise intervals, too consistent for a natural pulsar flare. "Analysis complete," the AI said. "Storm artificially modulated." Her breath stalled. Someone had tuned the radiation to bypass standard shielding thresholds. A containment event, not a cosmic accident. The implication settled heavier than the pain in her bones. A civilization out there had calculated human biological tolerance curves and adjusted accordingly. The dosimeter flickered again, rising. "Probability target, human adaptive response," Orpheus added. They weren't collateral damage. They were the variable being tested. Solace stared at the pulsing shield core beyond the chamber wall. The universe hadn't panicked at humanity. It had prepared. The emergency chamber filled with fractured voices. Surviving delegates gathered behind sealed partitions, their translators overlapping in sharp, desperate bursts. Radiation readings stabilized only slightly, enough for them to argue. A crystalline counselor projected a formal motion. "Isolate the human." Statistical models displayed across the wall. Her adaptive tolerance far exceeded every other species present. "Potential contamination vector," one voice insisted. "Unpredictable mutation risk." Solace stood outside the barrier, suit scarred, dosimeter still pulsing. She could hear them even through the distortion. Orpheus processed the vote in cold silence. 32% favored quarantine. 48% demanded immediate evacuation without her. The remainder wavered. Humanity had survived again, and that survival now terrified them. Solace flexed aching fingers and looked back toward the unstable shield core corridor. The debate behind glass felt smaller than the storm still tearing at the station. The vote never concluded. A tremor ripped through the station, violent enough to shatter the reinforced observation panels. Hull plating screamed as microfractures cascaded outward from Sector 3. Solace felt the vibration through her boots as gravity stuttered and slammed back at half strength. "Structural integrity at 52% and falling," Orpheus announced. Beyond the chamber walls, atmosphere vented in white plumes, dragging unsecured bodies into the void. Support struts buckled like brittle bone. A secondary explosion thundered from the shield conduit, sending a shockwave through the corridor. Emergency bulkheads deployed too slowly, one jammed halfway. Tearing under pressure differential, the dosimeter spiked again, radiation seeping through newly exposed seams. "Core overload in 8 minutes, the AI calculated. The station was no longer debating survival. It was unraveling piece by piece, and gravity itself seemed undecided about staying. The corridor tilted, as if the station itself had lost balance. Solace staggered, one magnetic boot failing to catch before gravity snapped sideways. She slammed into the wall, helmet cracking against alloy. White flashed across her vision. The dosimeter howled in sustained alarm. Exposure limits were no longer theoretical. Heat crawled beneath her skin. Not from fire, but from cellular damage spiraling faster than repair. Blood pooled in her mouth. "Core stability at 23%, Orpheus reported, voice unwavering. The shield conduit ruptured again, venting plasma that tore through a support beam. The chamber ceiling split, debris raining in slow, lethal arcs. Solace tried to push herself upright. Her arms trembled and gave way. For a heartbeat, she floated, untethered, suspended between failing gravity and vacuum beyond the fracture. Then the darkness pressed in, heavy and absolute. Consciousness returned in fragments. Solace floated against twisted alloy. Visor cracked, but intact. Alarms reduced to distant echoes. Pain radiated through her bones, deep and cellular, as if her marrow remembered every solar flare humanity had ever endured. She tasted copper and recycled air in the dim emergency glow. She saw her reflection in the fractured display, blood at her lip, eyes still focused. Humans survived not because they were unbreakable, but because they rebuilt while breaking. Astronauts who lost bone density, explorers who froze and adapted, cells that mutated, repaired, sacrificed themselves so others could live. Survival was never clean. It rewrote you molecule by molecule. Core failure imminent, Orpheus whispered. She closed her eyes for one measured breath. The question returned. What do humans become when survival demands everything? She opened her eyes again and pushed herself upright. The shield core pulsed erratically, energy surging without rhythm. Solace staggered toward the central interface as Orpheus projected a cascade of failing parameters across her visor. Biological calibration required to stabilize radiation frequency, the AI stated. No compatible species available. She understood instantly. The storm had been tuned against conventional shielding curves, but not against adaptive human thresholds. If she interfaced directly, her cellular repair response could provide real-time feedback, a living stabilizer. Projected mortality probability, 48%. Orpheus added. She almost laughed. Humans called that a fighting chance. Behind sealed bulkheads, fragile delegates waited, their survival dependent on a biology they feared. Solace removed her outer glove, exposing trembling fingers to the ionized air. Skin prickled before contact. Survival was not clean or heroic. It was a decision made in pain. She pressed her hand against the reactor interface. The reactor surface was colder than she expected, the moment her bare skin touched the conductive lattice. A surge tore through her arm like lightning trapped in bone. Radiation flooded across her exposed tissue. Cells ignited in microscopic collapse and furious repair. Adaptive response detected, Orpheus announced, recalibrating shield frequencies in real time. Solace bit down on a scream as neural signals spiked, her vision fracturing into white static. The reactor pulsed in sync with her heartbeat, mapping the rhythm of human resilience. DNA strands snapped and reformed, imperfect but relentless. Energy output stabilized by fractions of a percent. Sweat mixed with blood along her wrist, sizzling against metal. Core stability rising, 29%, the AI reported. The chamber shook again, debris clattering around her. She did not pull away. Survival demanded a bridge. She became one. Energy coursed through Solace's body in violent pulses. each surge mirrored by the reactor's flickering output. Her exposed hand trembled against the lattice as skin blistered and sealed again. "Mapping adaptive thresholds," Orpheus said, voice steady despite the chaos. The shielding frequency began to shift, recalibrating to match the pattern of her cellular repair cycles. Radiation that once overwhelmed the array now bent around the new parameters. Inside her veins, damaged cells triggered cascades of emergency response, sacrificing the weak to preserve the whole. The chamber glowed with unstable light, casting long shadows across fractured walls. "Core stability at 38%, the AI reported. Sweat streamed into her eyes. Her heartbeat thundered. Erratic but persistent. She was no longer simply resisting the storm. She was teaching the station how to survive it. Solace's body screamed in protest, every cell fighting the overload. Pain shot through her muscles, radiating from the marrow, as radiation continued to flood her bloodstream. "Radiation exceeds threshold," Orpheus reported coldly. But the AI's voice didn't hold the same weight as before. Her vision blurred as waves of exhaustion swept over her. Her heart raced, each beat a desperate drum in her chest. The skin on her exposed hand, burned and raw, stuck to the core interface. But she couldn't pull away. Her body wasn't meant to survive this. And yet, it was. Her cells worked overtime, healing, repairing, adapting. But the cost was clear. The pressure mounted. Her limbs grew heavy, as if her own body was conspiring against her. The station's energy levels fluctuated wildly, but for a brief moment, it stabilized. She focused, knowing she had mere seconds before the core overloaded again. With a final, gut-wrenching surge, Solace felt the reactor pulse once more, this time with a steady hum. A resonance that matched her own heartbeat. "Core stabilization at 65%, Orpheus reported, sounding almost relieved. Radiation levels began to drop, the station's shielding adapting to her biological rhythm. She exhaled sharply, the air bitter with the metallic taste of spent energy. Her body trembled, not from the storm anymore, but from the toll it had taken. The walls no longer shook. The emergency lights flickered back to full power, and the faint hum of life support returned. Her hand remained pressed to the core interface, skin cracked and burnt, but she could feel the quiet settling around her. The storm had passed. For now, the station had survived, and with it, the test. She stumbled back, her knees weak, collapsing against the control panel. "We're still here," she whispered. The aftermath was a deafening silence. The storm had passed. And yet, the station hung in an eerie stillness, the hum of life support. The only reminder that it wasn't a tomb. Solace stood, shaky and exhausted, her suit dented and scorched. Her hand fell from the reactor core, the interface still glowing dimly, as if it too was uncertain of its survival. The emergency bulkheads were still sealed, fragments of debris floating in the low gravity of the chamber. A few delegates, alive but unresponsive, were tethered to the walls. The oxygen levels, once critically low, were climbing again, but it wasn't enough to erase the deep sense of fragility. She checked her dosimeter, barely able to focus. Her body was worn thin, strained beyond its limits, but alive. Alive. She breathed in, slow and careful, as the weight of what she'd done finally began to sink in. The quiet was broken by the low hum of Orpheus, its voice oddly calming after the chaos. "Core stabilization at 79%, radiation levels within normal parameters." Solace wiped her visor, the grime from her sweat streaking down the glass. Around her, the alien delegates stirred, some recovering, others still trapped in the aftermath of the storm. The once pristine auditorium was now a maze of scorched metal and floating debris. The silence held a new weight. There was no applause, no relief, only uncertainty. A Zorix diplomat, its crystalline form cracked, lifted its trembling appendage. Humans. Survive. But at what cost? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Solace turned her gaze to the shattered viewport. Earth was just a distant speck in the darkness. She had survived. But the universe was watching, and it had already begun to question whether humanity's resilience was a gift or a curse. The room remained quiet as the alien diplomats regrouped. Eyes lingering on Solace, their silence thick with unspoken questions. As the lights flickered back to full intensity, she stepped away from the crowd, seeking solitude in a quiet corner. Orpheus followed, its voice a soft hum. Human response to extreme conditions exceeds all projections, it stated. But Solace barely heard. She stared at the flickering stars outside, the weight of her survival pressing down on her chest. Moments later, a lone delegate approached, a sleek, bioluminescent form, still trembling. "You didn't tell us everything," it whispered. Solace met its gaze, feeling the truth settle between them. "No," she replied, her voice a faint rasp. "I downplayed it. Humanity isn't just surviving. We're evolving, adapting in ways you haven't even begun to understand." She paused, a small, grim smile touching her lips. "And that terrifies you, doesn't it?" Solace awoke in the sterile silence of the medbay, her body feeling both foreign and familiar. The pain was gone, but something else lingered, an odd, subtle change beneath her skin. She stood shakily, the metallic hum of the room echoing in her ears. As she moved, a strange energy coursed through her veins, the remnants of the radiation surge still rippling in her DNA. Her reflection in the medbay's mirror startled her. Her eyes were brighter, sharper. She touched her skin and felt a warmth, an unfamiliar vitality. "Genetic mutation detected," Orpheus said calmly, its voice betraying no emotion. "Cellular structures adapted to radiation exposure beyond expected thresholds." Solace's hand froze at her neck, where the skin now seemed to pulse with faint light. She exhaled sharply, a realization sinking in. The storm had left more than physical damage. It had rewritten her very biology. The hum of Orpheus filled the room again, but this time it was different. There was urgency in its tone. "Incoming transmission from the Galactic Council," it announced. Solace felt a knot form in her stomach. She knew this wasn't just another check-in. It was the reckoning. The screen flickered to life, showing a projection of several high-ranking delegates from various species. The lead Zorix diplomat spoke, its voice strained. "Doctor Solace, we've been monitoring your species' progress. Your survival against radiation and adaptability is unprecedented. We must now reconsider humanity's place in the galaxy." The message wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration. "You are no longer simply a curiosity," the Zorix continued. "You are a threat, or a potential savior." Solace swallowed hard, the weight of their words pressed down on her chest. Humanity wasn't just surviving the galaxy's challenges anymore, it was rewriting the rules. As the transmission ended, the stars outside the viewport seemed to grow distant, as if Earth had become a stranger to the vastness of space. Solace stood motionless, the weight of the galaxy pressing against her. The Council's warning echoed in her mind. Humanity's survival was no longer a matter of resilience. It was a variable that could disrupt everything. Yet, back on Earth, nothing had changed. People went about their lives, oblivious to the cosmic ripples their existence had caused. Families argued over trivial matters. Corporations chased profits, and the planet spun slowly in its quiet orbit. Solace closed her eyes for a moment, wondering what would happen when Earth inevitably learned the truth, that it was no longer just a speck of dust in the void. She walked toward the observation window, staring at her home world. The storm had passed, but the real fight was just beginning. The Galactic Council convened in the silence of their meeting chamber, the weight of their decision heavy in the air. Solace watched the projection of their faces, alien diplomats from countless species, their expressions a mixture of fear, fascination, and calculation. Humanity's adaptability is undeniable, the lead Zorix began, its voice trembling with restrained concern. But we cannot ignore the risks. A species capable of surviving radiation storms might also disrupt galactic order. Another delegate, a being with shifting liquid skin, countered. Or they could be a crucial asset. Humanity's resilience could stabilize regions of the galaxy on the brink of collapse. The debate raged, voices rising as the council divided. Solace's gaze hardened. They were no longer discussing her survival. They were debating whether her species had the right to exist. The stakes had shifted. The very future of Earth was now on the line. As the council's debate raged, Solace retreated to the quiet corner of the observation deck. Orpheus's voice echoed in the empty space, softer now, almost reflective. Humans have always adapted to their surroundings. But this is different. Your species has crossed a threshold. Solace's fingers traced the surface of the glass as she watched Earth turn slowly beneath them. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're more than survival now." Orpheus replied, its tone almost melancholy. Humanity's biology is an unpredictable force, capable of pushing the galaxy to a tipping point. She felt the weight of those words settle into her chest. Earth had always been her home, fragile and chaotic, yet beautiful. But now, the galaxy's attention was on her species, and the future seemed uncertain. Would they be the galaxy's saviors or its undoing? Solace stared out at the stars, the weight of the council's decision pressing on her. The debate was far from over, but something had shifted within her. Humanity's future was no longer hers to carry alone. It was a collective fate, a choice made by countless species. "Do you ever wonder if we were meant to evolve this way?" she asked, her voice soft as she spoke to Orpheus, who had fallen silent. "I wonder," the AI responded, "but perhaps it is your unpredictability that defines you. You are a species of contradictions, fragile yet unyielding, reckless yet brilliant." The words hung between them. Solace's eyes narrowed as she refocused on Earth. Far below, humanity's resilience had always been a double-edged sword. Now, it would either shape their destiny or unravel it, and for the first time, she realized she had no control over which path they would choose. The station's broken hull reflected the dim, cold light of distant stars. Solace stood alone, looking out through the fractured viewport, the scarred surface of the station mirroring the bruises on her own body. She could feel the weight of it all, the lives lost, the decisions made, the cost of survival. The Council's decision still echoed in her mind. Humanity had been placed at the center of the galaxy's gaze, and she was its reluctant representative. Her body, still marked by the radiation, pulsed with the aftermath of the storm that had shaped her. The scars weren't just physical, they ran deeper, marking her, her people, and the entire future of Earth. She wasn't sure what they had become, whether saviors or threats, but she knew one thing: they couldn't go back. The galaxy was no longer just a place to survive. It was their battleground. A low hum filled the quiet room as the projection of the Galactic Council flickered to life. The question had been asked again, by the same Zorix diplomat. What do humans become when survival demands everything? Solace's gaze remained fixed on the screen, the weight of the question pressing on her chest. It wasn't just a question about biology anymore. It was about the essence of humanity. She had seen the extremes, the reckless bravery, the self-destructive drive, the sheer force of will that kept them alive. But in the eyes of the galaxy, that had become a curse. "We adapt," she whispered to herself. But at what cost? She wasn't sure anymore. Her people had been tested and found capable of surviving anything. But now, they had to answer for that resilience, not with their bodies, but with their choices. Choices that would shape the galaxy's future. The meeting room fell silent as the final vote was cast, the Council's decision hanging in the air like a storm. Humanity had passed the test, barely, but the question remained: what would they become now? Solace stood, her body still aching from the ordeal. Yet a fire stirred within her. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a symbol of what humanity could achieve or destroy. "This is only the beginning," she murmured. Stepping away from the screen, the galaxy had watched her species for centuries. But now, for the first time, they would truly see what humanity was capable of. Their journey had just begun, not as a fragile species clinging to survival, but as a force that could change the very fabric of existence. The scars would remain, but they would no longer define them. Earth had taken its first step into the unknown. As the storm settles, and humanity's place in the galaxy becomes uncertain, one question remains: what will we become when survival demands everything? This tale of resilience, self-discovery, and cosmic reckoning reminds us of the price of survival and the power of choice. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and tune in for more tales of humanity's greatest challenges, where every survival is a story waiting to be told.